The stench of desperation hung thick in the air of Kepler Station's lower levels, where the specialty markets operated beyond the reach of Galactic Federation oversight. Dane Cross pulled his worn jacket tighter as he descended the metal stairs, his boots echoing against the grated platforms. He wasn't here by choice. His cargo hauler needed parts, and the black market was the only place to find them without paying through the nose. The auction hall buzzed with the chatter of dozens of species, their various languages creating a discordant symphony. Dane had seen plenty of rough places in his 15 years hauling freight across the outer rim, but this made his stomach turn. The merchandise wasn't cargo, it was people. Beings of various races stood on raised platforms while auctioneers barked out their qualifications in trade standard. Displaced by war, sold for debt, or simply unlucky enough to be caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Dane kept his head down, pushing through the crowd toward the parts dealer in the back corner. "Next lot," the auctioneer's voice crackled through the cheap speakers. Two females, excellent condition despite their circumstances. Something made Dane pause. Maybe it was the uncomfortable silence that fell over the crowd, or the way the auctioneer's enthusiasm faltered. He turned toward the central platform and felt his breath catch. Two figures sat at the edge of the stage as far from the spotlight as possible. The first was small and delicate, with pale silver skin that seemed to shimmer under the harsh lights. Her large, dark eyes darted nervously around the room, and she clutched her knees to her chest like a child hiding from monsters. The second was her opposite in every way, tall, muscular, with dark scales running along her arms and neck. She sat perfectly straight, staring defiantly at the crowd with amber eyes that promised violence. "The silver ones from the ethereal colonies," the auctioneer continued, his tone dismissive. "Bit fragile, but they're supposed to be good with mental work. The scaled ones military-trained, Korvac Special Forces if the documentation's accurate." A murmur ran through the crowd, but it wasn't interested, it was concerned. Dane caught fragments of conversation. "Too weak for real work. Korvac units are unstable. More trouble than they're worth." The minutes stretched on. No bids came. The silver girl, Dane found himself thinking of her as barely more than a child despite her obviously adult features, seemed to shrink further into herself with each passing second. The scaled one's jaw tightened, her hands slowly curling into fists. "Come now," the auctioneer tried again, sweat beading on his forehead. "These are exotic specimens. Surely someone." 500 credits. The words left Dane's mouth before he realized he'd spoken. Every head in the room turned toward him, including those of the two girls on the platform. The silver one's eyes went wide with something that might have been hope. The scaled one studied him with the calculating gaze of a predator assessing a potential threat. "Ah, we have a bid." The auctioneer's relief was palpable. 500 for the pair. Do I hear 600? Silence. The crowd had already lost interest, moving on to scan the next lot being prepared. Dane felt sick realizing he was the only person in the room who saw them as anything more than damaged goods. 500 once, twice. Sold to the human. In the brown jacket. The gavel fell with a sound like a gunshot. Dane stood frozen for a moment, processing what he'd just done. He'd just bought two people. The thought made his skin crawl, but looking at their faces, fear mixed with desperate hope, he knew he couldn't have walked away. 20 minutes later, he found himself walking toward the docking bay with two very different companions. The silver girl, Kira, according to her documentation, stayed close to his left side, flinching at every sudden noise. The scaled one, Vex, maintained a precise 3-foot distance, her posture suggesting she could either flee or attack at a moment's notice. "So," Dane said awkwardly as they reached his ship, the stellar drift. "I guess we should talk about expectations." Vex's amber eyes narrowed. "You purchased us. The expectations are yours to set." The formal military tone made Dane wince. "No, that's not. Look, I don't know what I'm doing here, okay? I saw you two up there and I couldn't leave you." Kira spoke for the first time, her voice barely above a whisper. Why? Dane looked at her, then at Vex, then back at his battered cargo hauler. Because everyone deserves better than being left behind. 3 weeks aboard the Stellar Drift had established an uneasy routine. Dane had given Kira and Vex separate quarters, small but private spaces he'd converted from cargo holds. They ate meals together in awkward silence, worked on ship maintenance, with careful politeness, and danced around each other like strangers sharing an elevator. Dane was running diagnostics on the navigation array when it happened. A sharp gasp from behind him made him spin around. Kira stood frozen in the doorway, her silver skin pale as moonlight, her dark eyes wide with terror. "I'm sorry," she whispered, backing away. "I didn't mean to. I can't control it sometimes." "Control what?" Dane approached slowly, hands visible and non-threatening. "Your thoughts, they're so loud." Tears ran down her cheeks. "I saw the explosion, your partner Jace, the way the fuel depot—" "Stop." Dane's voice was gentle but firm. He'd never told anyone about that day, about watching his best friend die in a fireball because of a faulty valve Dane had installed. "It's okay. You couldn't have known." Kira's telepathic abilities had been manifesting sporadically since leaving Kepler Station. Dane suspected it was stress-related, her people's mental gifts apparently strengthened under emotional duress. What concerned him more was how she reacted each time, as if expecting punishment. "They used to hurt me when it happened," she admitted, reading his concern. "The traders who owned me before the auction. They said telepaths who couldn't control themselves were dangerous." Dane felt anger surge through him, not at her, but at those who'd broken something beautiful and turned it into a source of shame. "You're not dangerous, Kira, you're just learning." Heavy footsteps in the corridor announced Vex's arrival. The scaled woman filled the doorway, her amber eyes immediately assessing the situation. "Problem?" "No problem," Dane said quickly. "Just talking." Vex's gaze shifted between them, taking in Kira's tears and Dane's protective stance. Something flickered across her features, too quick to interpret. "The proximity sensors are detecting an incoming ship. Imperial configuration." The Imperial Navy meant trouble, especially for someone carrying passengers without proper documentation. Dane moved to the pilot's seat, Kira settling beside him while Vex took the gunner's position with practiced efficiency. The approaching vessel was sleek and predatory, an Imperial patrol cutter. Its captain's voice crackled through the comm system with bureaucratic authority. "Cargo vessel Stellar Drift, prepare for inspection. We have reports of illegal salvage operations in this sector." "Negative, Control," Dane responded. "We're hauling legitimate freight to Arcturus Station. Transmitting manifest now." While he transmitted falsified cargo documents, Dane caught Vex's eye in the reflection of his screen. She gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. She recognized something about that ship. The inspection team came aboard with the swagger of those who expected immediate compliance. 3 humans in Imperial uniforms led by a captain whose smile never reached his eyes. They went through the motions of checking cargo holds, but Dane could tell they were looking for something specific. "Interesting passengers you have," the captain commented, studying Kira and Vex with unconcealed interest. "That one's ethereal stock, rare, and the scaled one, Korvac military markings. There's good money for returned property." "They're crew members," Dane said firmly, "properly documented." "Documentation can be flexible, especially for the right price." The captain stepped closer to Kira, who instinctively moved behind Dane. "The ethereal breeding programs pay premium rates for telepathic bloodlines." That's when Vex moved. She didn't make threats or demands. She simply positioned herself between the Imperial captain and Kira, her stance shifting to something that made the air in the room feel dangerous. "The humans said they're crew," she stated quietly. "That makes them untouchable." The captain's hand moved toward his sidearm. He never came close to drawing it. Vex's training showed in every economical movement. She disarmed all 3 Imperials in under 10 seconds, her scaled hands moving with precise, devastating efficiency. The captain found himself on his knees, with his own weapon pressed against his neck. "You will return to your ship," Vex said conversationally. "You will log this as a routine inspection that found nothing of interest, and you will forget you ever saw us. You can't threaten Imperial officers. I'm not threatening anyone. Vex's smile was all teeth. I'm explaining what's going to happen. 20 minutes later, the Imperial cutter jumped to hyperspace, its crew presumably eager to be elsewhere. Dane watched it disappear on the sensors, his heart still pounding from the confrontation. Thank you, he said to Vex, for protecting Kira. I wasn't protecting her, Vex replied, though her glance toward the silver-skinned girl suggested otherwise. I was protecting the crew. But something had shifted. Kira looked at Vex with new appreciation, while Vex's rigid military bearing had softened slightly. For the first time since leaving Kepler Station, they felt like they might actually be on the same side. That evening, as they shared dinner in the ship's small galley, Dane raised the subject that had been weighing on his mind. I need you both to know something, he began. You're not prisoners here. When we reach Arcturus Station, you can go wherever you want. I won't stop you. Kira's fork paused halfway to her mouth. You would let us leave? Of course. You're not property, despite what those documents say. Vex studied him with those calculating, amber eyes. And if we choose to stay? Then you stay as crew. Equal partners, not whatever I accidentally bought you as. The silence stretched, but it felt different now, contemplative rather than uncomfortable. I have nowhere else to go, Kira admitted quietly. My people are gone. The traitors destroyed. The last ethereal colony 6 months ago. Vex nodded slowly. The Korvac military expelled me for excessive independence. There is no going back to my former life. Dane looked at both of them, the fragile telepath who was stronger than she knew, and the fierce warrior learning to trust again. Then, I guess we figure out what comes next together. For the first time since the auction, Kira smiled. 6 months later, the stellar drift hummed through hyperspace toward the Centauri system, its crew working in comfortable synchronization. Kira's telepathic abilities had proven invaluable for negotiations. She could sense deception and hidden motivations in ways that gave them significant advantages in trading. Vex had naturally assumed the role of security chief and co-pilot, her military training keeping them alive in the rougher sectors of space. Dane found himself watching them both more often than he should. The way Kira's silver skin seemed to glow when she concentrated, or how Vex's fierce amber eyes softened when she thought no one was looking. What had started as protective instinct had evolved into something deeper, more complicated. Dane? Kira's voice pulled him from his thoughts. She stood in the doorway of the bridge wearing one of his old shirts over her fitted pants. It hung loose on her smaller frame, somehow making her look both vulnerable and endearing. What's up? He turned from the navigation console, noting how she hesitated in the doorway. I wanted to thank you for today. She stepped closer, her bare feet silent on the deck plates. The way you handled the Arcturus Station Authority when they questioned my documentation. You don't need to thank me for treating you like family, Kira. The word hung in the air between them. Family. It was the first time he'd said it out loud, though the feeling had been growing for months. Kira's dark eyes widened slightly, and he caught the subtle shift in her breathing. Is that what we are? She asked softly. Family? Dane stood, closing the distance between them. What do you think we are? Instead of answering with words, Kira reached up and touched his face with her delicate fingers. The contact sent a small shock through both of them, not painful, but electric. Her telepathic abilities had been growing stronger, and physical contact amplified the connection. I can feel what you feel, she whispered. The way you look at me. At both of us. Before Dane could respond, she rose on her toes and kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, but when he didn't pull away, she pressed closer. Her skin was warm despite its silver hue, and she tasted like the sweet fruit they'd picked up on Kepler Station. The kiss deepened, and Dane's hands found her waist, pulling her against him. Through their connection, he could feel her emotions, mixing with his own. Desire, affection, and something deeper that made his chest tight. Kira, he breathed against her lips. I know, she replied, understanding more than his words conveyed. I feel it too. They moved to his quarters, the largest space on the ship, where they made love slowly and carefully. Kira was more passionate than her fragile appearance suggested, her telepathic gifts making every touch, every sensation shared between them. She gasped softly as he explored her silver skin, finding the sensitive spots along her neck and shoulders that made her arch against him. Afterward, they lay intertwined on his narrow bunk, Kira's head on his chest as he stroked her hair. "What about Vex?" she asked quietly, the question he'd been avoiding. "What about her?" "You feel the same way about her, I can sense it." Kira lifted her head to look at him. "And I think she feels the same about both of us." As if summoned by their conversation, the door chimed softly. "Enter," Dame called, and Vex stepped inside, stopping short when she saw them together. "I apologize," she said stiffly, her military training reasserting itself. "I didn't realize—" "Don't go," Kira said quickly, sitting up and pulling the sheet around herself. "Please." Vex stood frozen in the doorway, her amber eyes flicking between them. Dane could see the conflict in her posture, the desire to flee warring with something else. "Sit down, Vex," Dane said gently. "We need to talk." She moved to the chair by his desk, perching on the edge as if ready to bolt. "I don't want to complicate things." "Things are already complicated," Kira observed. "The question is whether we're going to pretend otherwise." The conversation that followed was halting, full of false starts and uncomfortable silences. Vex had been trained that emotions were weaknesses, vulnerabilities that enemies could exploit. The idea of caring about not one but two people went against everything she'd been taught. "I'm not good at this," she admitted finally. "At feelings. My people don't form pair bonds the way humans do. We have clutchmates, battle partners, but not what?" Dane prompted. "Not love." The word seemed foreign on her tongue. Kira moved from the bed to kneel beside Vex's chair, taking her scaled hands in her smaller ones. "Maybe it's time to learn something new." The first kiss between Kira and Vex was tentative, an exploration of differences. Soft lips against firm scales, gentle telepathic probing against fierce mental discipline. But when Vex responded, pulling Kira closer with careful strength, the hesitation melted away. Dane watched, feeling his chest tighten with emotions he couldn't name. When Vex looked at him over Kira's head, her amber eyes questioning, he joined them. What followed was discovery. Three very different beings learning how their bodies and hearts could fit together. Vex was powerful and protective, her scaled skin beautiful in its own way, while Kira was the bridge between them, her telepathic abilities creating connections that went beyond physical touch. Later, as they lay together in the expanded space of Vex's larger quarters, Dane traced patterns on Kira's silver skin while she curled against Vex's scaled side. "So what happens now?" Vex asked quietly. "Now we figure out what we're building together," Dane replied. "All three of us." Kira smiled, her mental voice touching both their minds simultaneously. Family. Love. Home. All the things we thought we'd lost. Through the viewport, stars streaked past in hyperspace, carrying them toward whatever came next. But for the first time since the auction, none of them were running from their past. They were running toward their future. Together. The bond between them had shifted, evolved into something none of them had expected, but all of them needed. As they drifted toward sleep, wrapped in each other's warmth, the stellar drift continued its journey through the void, no longer carrying refugees, but carrying a family that had chosen each other against all odds. And in the vast galaxy around them, word was beginning to spread about the unusual crew of the cargo hauler, the human who saw potential where others saw problems, the telepath who could touch minds and hearts, and the warrior who protected what she loved with deadly precision. There, bond would indeed be felt across the stars. The revelation came during what should have been a routine stop at Titan Orbital Station. Kira had been helping negotiate a salvage contract when her telepathic abilities suddenly flared beyond anything they'd experienced before. She collapsed. In the station administrator's office, silver skin blazing with ethereal light as her mind connected with something vast and ancient. "The archive," she whispered, when she finally regained consciousness in the station's medical bay. "It's still active, hidden in the quantum substrate of the station's computers." Dane and Vex exchanged worried glances. Kira had been having episodes more frequently, her powers growing stronger but also more unpredictable. This was different, though. Her eyes held a clarity they'd never seen before. "What archive?" Dane asked gently, taking her hand. "The collective memory of my people, the ethereal mind weavers." Her voice carried new strength, as if she'd found a missing piece of herself. "We weren't just telepaths, Dane. We were the galaxy's memory keepers, the ones who preserved knowledge and history in living minds." Before she could explain further, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Vex was on her feet instantly, her warrior instincts screaming danger. Through the medical bay's viewport, they could see ships dropping out of hyperspace, sleek predatory vessels with the distinctive configuration of Korvac special forces. "They found me," Vex said quietly, her face going pale beneath her scales. The lead ship was broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Strike Commander Thane of the Korvac 47th Assault Division. We are here to reclaim stolen military property. Stand down and prepare to be boarded." Dane's blood went cold. "Property?" "Me," Vex replied. "I wasn't just expelled from the military. I escaped. They've been hunting me for 3 years." The station security forces were no match for Korvac commandos. Within minutes, armored figures were flooding the corridors, moving with the precise efficiency that had made them legendary throughout the galaxy. Dane grabbed their emergency gear while Vex sealed the medical bay's entrance. "There's another way out," Kira said, her voice strange and distant. "The archive is showing me maintenance shafts that lead to the docking ring." They moved through the station's hidden passages, Kira's newfound connection to the ethereal archive guiding. Then past patrol after patrol, but as they reached the docking bay where the stellar drift waited, they found their path blocked. Strike Commander Thane stood before their ship, flanked by a full squad of Korvac warriors. He was massive even by Korvac standards, his scaled, hide-bearing ritual scarification that spoke of countless battles. When he saw Vex, his amber eyes lit with satisfaction. "Beta 77, he said, using her military designation. "You've caused considerable inconvenience." "My name is Vex," she replied, stepping protectively in front of Dane and Kira. "And I'm not going back." Thane's laugh was like grinding metal. "You were bred for war, trained from hatching to be the perfect weapon. You don't get to simply walk away from that investment. Watch me." The battle that followed was unlike anything Dane had ever witnessed. Vex moved with lethal grace, her military training pushed to its absolute limits as she faced opponents who'd been trained exactly as she had. But she was outnumbered, and Korvac warriors didn't fight alone. They fought as a unit. That's when Kira stepped forward. "Stop," she said quietly. But her voice carried across the docking bay with impossible force. The ethereal archive hadn't just preserved memories, it had preserved power. The collective psychic strength of an entire race flowed through Kira, turning her from a fragile telepath into something far more dangerous. The Korvac warriors stopped mid-attack, their minds suddenly flooded with visions of their own mortality, their own fears and regrets. Strike Commander Thane staggered, his mental disciplines crumbling under the assault. "Impossible. The ethereals are extinct." "Not extinct," Kira replied, silver light playing around her like captured starfire. "Hidden, waiting, and very, very angry about what was done to our people." The psychic pressure she exerted was immense, but Dane could see it was taking everything she had. Her silver skin was growing pale, and small streams of blood trickled from her nose. She couldn't maintain this level of power for long. That's when Dane realized what needed to happen. He moved to stand between Kira and Vex, taking their hands in his. The moment their skin touched, something extraordinary occurred. Kira's telepathic abilities found new pathways, connecting not just to the archive, but to Vex's tactical knowledge, and Dane's intuitive understanding of people and situations. They became something greater than the sum of their parts. Vex's combat skills were enhanced by precognitive flashes from Kira, allowing her to anticipate attacks before they happened. Kira's psychic assaults were guided by Vex's strategic thinking, making them precise rather than overwhelming, and Dane became the anchor that held them together, his steady presence allowing both women to push their abilities beyond what either could achieve alone. The Korvax squad fell in less than 2 minutes. Strike Commander Thane found himself on his knees, his weapon discarded, staring up at 3 beings who had somehow transcended their individual limitations. "What are you?" he whispered. "Family," Dane replied simply. They left the Strike Commander alive but broken, his forces scattered and his ship's systems disabled. As the stellar drift cleared Titan Station's gravity well, Vex sat quietly in the co-pilot's seat, processing what had happened. "I never thought I could be free of them," she admitted. "The Korvac don't forgive and they don't forget." "Maybe not," Dane said, "but they'll think twice before coming after us again." That night, in the privacy of their shared quarters, the 3 of them came together with a passion intensified by their shared battle. Vex's usual control gave way to desperate hunger, her need to reaffirm life after facing death. She pulled Dane to her with fierce strength, her scaled skin burning under his touch as they moved together with primal intensity. Kira joined them, her telepathic abilities creating a feedback loop of sensation that left all 3 gasping and crying out in languages they didn't share but somehow understood. What had been gentle exploration in their earlier encounters became something more urgent, more necessary. When they finally lay spent and intertwined, Vex spoke into the darkness. "The bond we share. It's not just emotional anymore, is it?" "No," Kira replied, her mental voice touching both their minds. "We're becoming something new, something the galaxy has never seen before." Dane traced patterns on both their skin, feeling the truth of it in his bones. "Then I guess we'd better figure out what to do with that." Through the viewport, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, but everything had changed. The 3 refugees who'd found each other at an auction had become something unprecedented, a fusion of human adaptability, ethereal psychic power, and Korvac military precision. The galaxy would indeed feel their bond, but perhaps not in the way any of them had originally imagined. 1 year after the confrontation at Titan Station, the stellar drift had been replaced by a larger vessel, the Haven's Light, equipped with medical facilities, expanded living quarters, and defensive systems. Their reputation had spread across the outer rim, the human who saw worth in the worthless, the last ethereal who could touch minds and heal hearts, and the Korvac warrior who protected the innocent with deadly precision. They'd rescued 43 beings from various forms of slavery or abandonment, finding homes, families, or purpose for each one. But today was different. Today was about them. The ceremony took place in the ship's main cargo hold, now converted into a gathering space. Representatives from a dozen species had come to witness something unprecedented, a formal bonding between 3 beings from different worlds, different backgrounds, different evolutionary paths. Elder Silas, an ancient Centaurian whose kind specialized in interspecies diplomacy, officiated the ceremony. "We gather to witness the union of 3 souls who have chosen to become more than the sum of their parts," he intoned in his melodious voice. Dane stood between Kira and Vex, wearing the formal jacket he'd inherited from his father, a cargo, hauler's dress uniform, simple but dignified. Kira wore flowing silver robes that seemed to capture and reflect the ship's lighting, making her glow like a living star. Vex had chosen traditional Korvac ceremonial armor, but instead of the usual weapon displays, she'd decorated it with symbols of protection and family. "Do you, Dane Cross of Earth, accept these bonds not as master but as equal partner?" Elder Silas asked. "I do," Dane replied, his voice steady, despite the emotions churning in his chest. "As equal partner, as family, as the person I choose to be." The elder turned to Kira. Do you, Kira of the Ethereal Mindweavers, accept these bonds not as servant but as equal partner? Kira's response came both aloud and telepathically, her mental voice touching everyone present. I do. As equal partner, as chosen family, as the keeper of our shared memories. Finally, Elder Silas addressed Vex. Do you, Vex of the Korvac Warriorborn, accept these bonds not as property but as equal partner? I do, Vex said, her usually controlled voice thick with emotion. As equal partner, as chosen family, as the shield that guards what we've built together. The ceremony that followed was unlike any traditional bonding ritual. Elder Silas had crafted something new, drawing elements from human, ethereal, and Korvac traditions, but creating something unique to their situation. They exchanged gifts. Dane gave each woman a piece of jewelry crafted from metal salvaged from their first ship together. Kira shared mental impressions of their most precious memories, and Vex offered ritual scars that would mark them as her clutchmates in Korvac tradition. When it was done, when the vows were spoken and the bonds officially recognized, they were no longer three individuals who happened to share a ship. They were a family unit, legally and emotionally bound across species lines. The celebration that followed was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Galactic Federation Council. The message was brief but ominous. A coalition of slave traders led by someone calling himself the Broker had issued a challenge. They were tired of the Haven's Light interfering with their operations and had decided to make an example. They've taken hostages, Dane said grimly, reviewing the intelligence data. 300 beings, mostly children, held on a fortress station in the Void Nebula. They want us to come alone. It's obviously a trap, Vex observed, already running. Tactical assessments. Of course it is, Kira agreed, her mental voice carrying grim determination. But we can't leave those children to die. The journey to the Void Nebula took 6 days, during which they prepared for what would likely be their most dangerous mission yet. The fortress station was a converted asteroid, bristling with weapons and surrounded by a fleet of ships. Intelligence suggested over 1,000 armed defenders, all seasoned criminals with nothing to lose. The night before they reached the nebula, the three of them came together in their shared quarters with desperate intensity. This might be their last chance to express what they meant to each other, and none of them held back. Dane made love to both women with fierce tenderness, memorizing every touch, every sound, every sensation. Kira's telepathic abilities allowed all three to share not just physical pleasure, but emotional intimacy that transcended normal bounds. Vex's passion was fierce and protective, her scaled skin burning under their touches as she claimed and was claimed in return. They moved together in a rhythm that spoke of deep connection, of bonds forged through shared trials and mutual choice. When they finally lay spent and intertwined, no one spoke of the possibility that this might be goodbye. Instead, they simply held each other, drawing strength from their connection. The assault on the fortress began at dawn, station time. The Haven's Light approached under false transponder codes, appearing to be a simple cargo hauler carrying the ransom the broker had demanded. But as they docked, the plan revealed its true nature. Dane went in first, ostensibly to negotiate with the broker, a grotesque Vegan whose cybernetic implants had long since overwhelmed his original biology. While he kept the crime lord's attention, Kira and Vex moved through the station's maintenance systems, their bond allowing them to coordinate without communication devices. The battle, when it came, was brutal and decisive. Vex's combat skills, enhanced by Kira's precognitive abilities and Dane's tactical thinking, turned her into a force of nature. She moved through the defenders like a living weapon, never wasting motion, never missing a target. Meanwhile, Kira's mental abilities had evolved beyond simple telepathy. She could now influence electronic systems directly, turning the station's own defenses against its occupants. But it was their combined effort that proved unstoppable. When the three of them finally confronted the broker in his command center, they fought as a single entity. Dane's adaptability, Kira's psychic power, and Vex's warrior training merged into something that transcended individual capability. The broker fell, his criminal empire crumbling around him, and the hostages were freed. In the aftermath, as they helped evacuate the rescued children and their families, Elder Silas approached them. "You've become something new," he observed. "Not just a bonded family, but something the galaxy has never seen before." "What do you mean?" Dane asked. "You've created a new kind of unity, not just between yourselves, but between the species you represent. Others are taking notice. There are rumors of similar groups forming. Humans, aliens, and others who've been cast aside finding each other and choosing to become family. 6 months later, the Haven's Light had become the flagship of something larger, a loose confederation of rescued beings, reformed criminals, and idealistic volunteers who'd chosen to follow their example. They'd established 3 permanent stations in different sectors, each serving as a refuge for the displaced and abandoned. Dane stood on the bridge of their ship, watching Kira work with a group of young telepaths they'd rescued from a research facility. Her silver skin glowed with contentment as she helped them control their abilities, turning what had once been sources of fear into tools of healing and connection. Vex entered the bridge carrying their newest rescue, an infant Korvac, whose parents had been killed in a raid. The sight of the fierce warrior gently cradling the child never failed to move him. She'd found her purpose not in war, but in protection, becoming a mother figure to dozens of orphaned children. "Status report?" Dane asked as she joined him at the viewport. "All stations report green. The Andromedans have agreed to our proposal for the 4th Sanctuary Station, and the Federation Council is considering our request for official recognition." Kira's mental voice touched both their minds, and the ethereal archive has recorded it all. Our story, our bond, our family. Future generations will know that love can transcend species, that strength comes from unity, and that no one has to face the universe alone. As if summoned by her words, their various rescued children, now numbering in the hundreds, began gathering in the observation lounge. Human, alien, and hybrid children who'd found safety and purpose under their protection. They looked up at the 3 figures on the bridge with trust and affection that spoke of bonds deeper than blood. "Think we've made our mark on the galaxy, yet?" Dane asked with a smile. Vex's amber eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "I think we're just getting started." Through the viewport, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, but the galaxy itself had changed. The bond between a human cargo hauler, a ethereal telepath, and a Korvac warrior had indeed been felt across the cosmos, not as conquerors or destroyers, but as something far more powerful, proof that connection, love, and chosen family could triumph over any force that sought to divide or diminish the worth of sentient life. Their story had become legend, whispered in slave markets and refugee camps, carried by traders and diplomats to every corner of known space. The tale of 3 beings who refused to be defined by their past, who chose love over fear, unity over division, and family over everything else. In the vast dance of civilizations across the galaxy, they had become something entirely new, and their light continued to shine, drawing others who had been lost or abandoned into the warmth of chosen belonging. The auction where they'd first found each other seemed like a lifetime ago, but the truth discovered there remained constant. Everyone deserved better than being left behind, and sometimes the most unlikely bonds could change the universe itself.